Alex, one of my favorite things about Climbing Gold, this project, is when we do a story or a deep dive and we find the original.
What do you mean?
Our sport isn't all that old. Like, it's gained a lot of momentum and a lot of changes in the last 70 years, right? And a lot of what we take for granted as modern climbers, like, we don't even think about. Like, why do we use chalk? You walk into a gym and they sell 4 types of different chalk. It's completely ubiquitous. But when you go back and when you look, you can find the original. There is like the patient zero that came up with an idea that said something like chalk would be helpful to climbers. And they went and did it.
I guess in that case, that's John Gill, who also invented dynamic movement and bouldering and basically brought gymnastics into rock climbing.
Yeah, which is pretty wild when you think about it. And like last year, we had the old recordings from John Backer, and he was talking about the very beginnings of training and climbing, which was really cool to hear because like behind every single element in our craft, someone had to problem solve to find a solution to a climbing need. Like, I'll give you an example, Alex. Like, if your goal is to climb as much as possible across the different landscapes in America, what is the solve for that?
Well, I mean, I guess I lived it to some extent. You drop out of college, you live in your car, you travel, you basically don't spend any money, you live cheap, you try to scrounge how you can, and you just you become a dirtbag climber.
Yeah. And that idea, essentially the idea of the Dirtbag, someone invented that, or I should say a couple invented that. Few people have heard of Herb and Jan Conn. They were never as prolific as someone like Fred Beckey, but their commitment to the sport was every bit as influential. In the years following World War II, the Conns dropped out of mainstream society, moved into their car, and started establishing bold first ascents across the country.
In a way, they were the original van lifers. They made some of the first climbing films, they wrote and recorded songs about climbing, and wrote articles about their very different approach to life. While some of America was busy buying TVs and microwaves and starting nuclear families, Jan and Herb were living a countercultural idea, chasing experiences instead of comfort.
And that idea of like chasing moments, chasing climbs, chasing experiences, that is the backbone of our sports ethos. But the Conns, despite sort of helping define that, they almost disappeared from climbing's conscious until 2 filmmakers set out to bring their story to life in the new film Catching Pine Cones. Herb and Jan passed away, but we are psyched to share the interviews with Jan captured through the decades and gathered up by filmmakers Chad Heddleston and Parker Michels-Boyce.
This is an incredible look at 2 lives lived decidedly on their own terms. I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitz Cahall.
This is Climbing Gold.
We need to tell the viewer who you are.
Okay.
So who are you?
What?
So who are you?
Oh, who am I? Well, I'm Jan Conn.
As I climb up the boulder with the rope on my shoulder,
I've always been a misfit in the normal world, but I found a place for misfits, and it seems to be here.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
A kid. I think I succeeded. I don't think we ever really grew up.
It's hard not to look at this interview of Jan Conn and immediately be drawn in. Her eyes twinkle and blaze, and you buy that maybe this 90-year-old woman in front of us never really grew up. She flashes a wry smile and looks intently towards the person behind the camera, Chad Heddleston. He's asking about a moment 6 decades earlier in Jan's life. A moment a lot of us can relate to, where for the first time in your life, you're done with school, you're no one's responsibility, and you gotta figure out what to do with your time.
We wanted to climb everything there was in sight. And for the first few years, we lived in a little panel truck and toured the whole country climbing. When we had to get work, we'd both get work, and we figured 2 people working 6 months a year is just as good as 1 person working 12 to support a family. If we got a responsible job, we wanted to get out of it as soon as we could. We didn't really think that we could possibly get along living that way, but we seem to. I don't know, we like the outdoors, and we didn't care about what most people seem to care about. So we didn't fit in anywhere.
Let's just start with, what are you guys' names? What do you guys do?
I'm Chad Heddleston. I'm the director of Catching Pine Cones and coordinator at a community college, rock climber, family man.
I'm Parker Michels-Boyce. I'm a freelance photographer and sometimes videographer in Richmond, Virginia. Catching Pine Cones was my first feature-length documentary film as the director of photography and one of the co-editors.
Cool. So tell me, what is Catching Pine Cones?
It's a true life story of Jan and Herb Conn, legendary American climbers who lived the American dream in their own way. They were just phenomenal dirtbags that kicked off the whole dirtbag lifestyle thing and kind of led the way for the rest of us rock climbers.
Jan, we interviewed while she was at home in South Dakota. She was 96, and she's just such a character. She's super witty. She's got tons of great stories, obviously, and it's just so easy to fall in love with her. So we were excited for more people to get to meet her.
Yeah, so, I mean, you said legendary American climbers, and yet most people have probably never heard of Jan and Herb Conn. Tell me about the legend. How did you guys hear about them, and what drew your interest?
So I heard about them first, just climbing, finding their name in a bunch of guidebooks. I was like, who are these Conn people? Like, why is Conn's East, Conn's West at Seneca Rocks named that? You know, why are these people popping up in all the places where I'm doing my first trad routes? You know, the more I dig into it, the more I find out about them, the more psyched I am on their story. But they kind of just disappeared and they got really old. And so now we picked it up years later and we're like, man, Jan is still alive. She's still a cool lady. Let's go like hang out with her and talk to her. And she was a performer, so she just dove right in.
When did you leave home with your parents?
Well, actually, I guess when I went to college. I stayed out a year after high school to get money to start college because I wanted to major in music, and I didn't think that was a sensible thing to do. So I thought I better pay for it myself. Herb said the University of Colorado was the only place to go in Boulder, so that's where I went.
Did rock climbing have anything to do with that?
Well, probably, although I didn't do much rock climbing while I was there. I didn't even join the hiking club. My reaction to people is to get away. When I'm away, I'm relaxed and do fine. But if you start to squeeze me in, I don't know, it doesn't work.
That love for each other and the solitary places would define the Conns. If anything, their time at Boulder cemented the idea that they were chasing something that existed out in the remote corners of our country, far from the spotlight, far from the mainstream.
I got married in the middle of my freshman year, which of course you aren't supposed to do. Herb was working. He was a good little boy. His mind was just everywhere, but he behaved himself and graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder in electrical engineering. He took engineering because he liked math, but he didn't ever really want to be an engineer. He didn't want to be anything that he knew existed, I think. And I finished that year. And then I went back to Washington, D.C., where Herb was working as an electrical engineer for the Navy Department. This was during the Second World War, and we were just counting the days until the war was over so that we could do our thing.
The Conns made the most of their time in D.C., falling into a small community of climbers and hikers. Carter Rock, the small crag just outside of Washington, D.C., was the place to be. And the Conns went to work. They established Herbie's Horror, one of the first 5.9s in the country. They ventured up to Seneca Rocks and created what might be the first climbing magazine in the country, Up Rope, through the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. The war ended, Herb was free from the Navy, and Jan and Herb set out on what was likely the first American climbing road trip.
We had a little panel truck, Nobody had RVs in those days. I don't know what was the matter with them.
Here's Herb from an archived interview.
We had shelves and a bed and cabinets and a desk.
First one we got was so small that we could just sleep in the floor, and all the shelves had to hang from the ceiling. You felt like you were crawling into a coffin when you got into bed because the shelves were right over your nose. And traveled on, as you said, out to California, and then his sister was vacationing at Katahdin, so we trucked all the way across the country to have vacation with her and her husband. Then after that, we just we tried to work in the winter and climb in the summers. And we had strange jobs, working in a wood shop up in New Hampshire. And we climbed on weekends. If we saw something sticking up somewhere around, we'd try to hunt it up and climb it. We climbed down in Colorado around the Boulder area because Herb knew that from having been to school there. Just enjoyed being ourselves, which a lot of people don't know how to do. I think they get it stomped out of them. We like to look out the windshield and see what was there, but we would much rather come to grips with it firsthand. We felt a lot better about driving when we stopped and got out and had contact with the world. And we did that when we were working our way around. We'd stop and get a job and get to know the people and get to know the area, which seemed a good way to do it.
We'll be back with more after the break.
I'm curious, Alex, whether you like the prep that happens before a big day out, like getting ready, like thinking about the gear, dialing it all in, like those sort of negotiations that happen.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's always exciting when you're like, oh, I'm putting the gear on the harness, I'm getting everything in the bag just right. Yeah, just knowing that something consequential is happening the next day and you are getting ready for it.
There are like totally some missions where what you're wearing can make the difference between success and failure.
Definitely in the mountains, that is true. And in cold climates. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely true in a lot of places. Climbing big mountains are places where if you get wet and you get cold, it's kind of game over.
You're going down.
Yeah, exactly. You're going down. And so having the right layering, it's what one of my friends calls your action suit. And so you always go to the same kit because you know it will hold up in the mountains, basically. Summit Series is the pinnacle North Face product. It's what you want for big days. It's what you want for missions that have consequence. Discover gear designed to take you to new heights at thenorthface.com.
Alex, I know that June likes, dare I say, loves waffles.
Actually, my girls ate waffles this morning on the way to the airport.
Did you just hand them to, they're like, get in the car, kids, here's the waffle, and they're good to go?
Well, a lot of the time, the girls just get into the freezer and just pull the frozen waffles out of the drawer and
make it happen. It's awesome. Kodiak's Power Waffles have a few flavors, including blueberry, which is a favorite in our house.
The Power Waffles are made with 100% whole grains and are protein packed, but they still have the convenience of being ready to eat in as long as the toaster takes.
Minutes, which is perfect for getting breakfast on the table fast and getting out the door.
Keep your wild ones going with a protein-packed breakfast that will keep them fueled for big days. Find Kodiak Power Waffles in the freezer aisle at your local grocery store. They're the ones with the bear on the box. Learn more at kodiakcakes.com.
This is how the Conns lived for many years. Outsiders, vagabonds, passionate climbers, establishing climbs across America. Their interests lay not only in climbing, but in a range of other passions as well. Herb was a dedicated mathematician, and Jan played dozens of instruments and wrote songs. They established early first ascents at Cannon Cliff, the Santa Catalina Mountains, Monument Valley, and Zion National Park. They climbed in tennis shoes, think Chuck Taylors. They tied ropes around their waist and protected roots with the occasional piton.
At the time that they were active, there were these kind of national climbing journals. There was Summit Magazine, Appalachia Magazine, And so they were submitting some different like documentation of some of their adventures and climbs and first ascents. And there's some really cool accounts of all the stuff that they did back then, and stuff that you read and you're just like, holy crap. What was it, Cannon in New Hampshire? Like the account of that when they just like took a bus and went up there and did it. And they didn't even know that they were doing a new route because they didn't even know where the other routes were.
How long did it take you guys to track down all these resources and to make this film? Like, how long were you guys working on the... You spent 10 years working on the film? Oh, Jesus.
So I went I went to South Dakota to meet Jan in 2015. It's now 2026. Okay. We did all the research many times over, and there's still many rabbit holes that we've...
So you put 10 years of work into it, and you're still looking to solve little problems.
Yeah,
like
sure.
to figure some things out. That is crazy.
There's the time they were on the What's My Line show. Herb Conn was on What's My Line in New York City as a TV show, like in the early 60s. And if anybody finds that episode, send it to us because it doesn't exist, apparently.
I think it was around 2023. So Chad called me in 2020 and was like, hey man, I've got this project. I thought it was going to be like a short film that I was going to throw on YouTube, but it's just become like such a bigger deal and I really want to do it right. And so he called me in about 2020 and was like, hey, do you want to work on this film with me? And, you know, I think it's got some potential. And he told me about it, and immediately I had never heard of the Conns before that conversation. But immediately I was pretty hooked, and I realized, like, you know, as a journalist, you know, about my background's in photojournalism, I was like, this is one of those stories that just doesn't come along very often. And when it does, like, you really have to jump on it because it's worth telling. I think we did probably 8 or 10 trips to South Dakota to do interviews and film climbing and all that. When we were starting to meet people and, you know, do some research on this and, you know, find out who some of her friends were and schedule some interviews, you know, we were asking ourselves, like, who are we two guys from the East Coast to do this documentary? Like, why are we the ones to pick this story up? Is there someone better who knew her that should be telling the story? But the more we asked around and the more we got to know some of her friends, you know, people just said, like, somebody needs to do this. We're so glad you're here. Like, please, you know, while there's still time and while there's so much information out there, like, we really want their story to endure.
Yeah, it's almost like they're the original dark horses of climbing. Or is it just that they predated all the climbing stories that I grew up with? I mean, because it seems like they were active in climbing so long ago that it's almost like before the history of climbing started, practically. Or is the fact that I just don't know the Conns, is that just because I grew up on the West Coast and I just haven't seen all the routes? I mean, like, if I was an East Coast climber, would I know all their routes?
You're a history of climbing person, so you would probably know them. If you grew up where I grew up, you would definitely know them.
And just to be clear, which years were they most active? I mean, they climbed their whole lives, but what was kind of like their heyday?
So 41 to they were in Yosemite in 47, and that was when they first also came through South Dakota, and then they moved to South Dakota in 49. And then they were active as climbers until really only like 59, like in their heyday.
As far as like, why is their story not known? I think, you know, they were active right at the dawn of rock climbing as like an established kind of its own sport activity, you know? I mean, a lot of people, Chad and I have talked about this quite a bit, like a lot of people back then were mountaineering and rock climbing was part of it. And it seems to us like Jan and Herb really were like, you know, we just like the rock climbing part. We're just going to do that.
Sort of like, whoa, like I didn't even know there was, you know, real climbing effort going on. I mean, I guess I knew a tiny bit because there was a little bit in Yosemite before that, but.
I've got the 50s, you know, golden age of Yosemite book, and it's like, there's like one woman in that book. And I think she's the same woman in 2 different pictures. Jan did all this stuff, and like, they were all first female ascents.
Well, first ascents. Yeah.
Right. She just called them first ascents. I mean, yeah, they were both. They just did it because they loved it. And so it was not about tracking the details. I think they did mostly to some extent, you know, like in their journals. And so there is a lot of information. There was a guidebook written about the adventure climbs of Herb and Jan Conn in South Dakota in 2008 or something. And it's just only their routes, And that was all journal entries, just pulled from her journal. So they did track it, but they also weren't trying to share. Yeah.
At that moment, when it came to rock climbing, there were a few features that stood out on a climber's resume. Amongst them was Wyoming's Devil's Tower. For Jan, she was blazing a path. Many of the climbing clubs across the U.S., they had strict rules about who could and couldn't lead, and a woman couldn't. Outside of the constraints of those systems, though, Jan was leading and establishing routes, and equal in every way to Herb. Devil's Tower was the moment that Jan began to understood that she was changing the narrative.
We were only about the seventh ascent of people that had climbed it. And it was a big deal for me because none of them had been women. And we didn't make too much of that, but still, you can't help but feel kind of proud of yourself when you get back down. And at Devil's Tower, there's this trail going right around the tower. And of course, people had been seeing us up there. And they were all lined along the trail looking at these strange creatures that had come down from the top of Devil's Tower. And when they'd stop and talk to us and ask us questions. One big fat slob says, "Well, now how does this work?" And he says to Herb, "You climb up somewhere and then pull her up?" And of course, I was incensed at that. I'd worked just as hard to get up there as Herb had. And so Herb was, of course, very patient and explained how it worked. But I sat there and fumed and thought, I think I want to climb this tower with somebody that couldn't possibly pull me up. And I met Jane Showaker, who was a climber in the D.C. area. She was small. She was a lot lighter than I was, but she was very lithe and strong. Herb was down below listening to all the comments. Somebody pay them to do that? You couldn't pay me to do it. And we were up there climbing, and we made our climb, and we felt good about it, and we came down. And I thought, gee, I wish that guy that made that crack was here. But a tourist is a tourist, and there were lots of tourists there. Finally, this guy looks at us and turns to his wife and as they start to walk away and says, "It can't be much of a climb if they can do it." So you don't climb for the impact you're going to make on people and the respect you think you deserve. You climb because you want to climb. And that's the only reason that's valid.
We'll be back with more after the break.
Do you guys have a summer jam right now? Like, are the girls listening to something on repeat?
The girls are definitely listening to things on repeat all the time, basically kids' movie music. My jam is a little more, all the same rock I've listened to my whole life.
Yeah. How do the girls feel about your music?
Actually, the girls are getting into my music because now we take turns. Whenever we're rocking the Turtlebox, they get a song, I get a song. And so, they're growing up on Frozen and Tool.
Breakfast of Champions. Whatever your music preference, Turtlebox makes the portable Ranger speaker perfect for wherever summer might take you.
Yeah, the portable Ranger speaker is great for hanging out on the deck. I use it in the garage all the time. Basically, training in the garage is kind of the way. It's lightweight, compact, durable, and it's super easy to connect to, which I think is actually really important because it's freaking annoying when you can't sync your device.
Truth.
Designed for the outdoors, Turtlebox makes durable and portable Bluetooth speakers in a range of sizes so you can take your music anywhere. Find out more at turtleboxaudio.com. I just saw that Herb cleaned the president's faces on Mount Rushmore. I was like, is that a thing? Like, that's crazy.
It's one of the layers of the story that once you start digging and you're like, wait, what?
They climbed up Mount Rushmore. Like, which has never been done before or after, probably.
How do you climb Mount Rushmore? I mean, are there holds?
You between Thomas Jefferson's wig and George Washington's nose.
I'm going to look up a picture right now.
We have some of that in the film. Well, we do have that story in the film. They wrote about it for the little publication that they first started. They had this excuse to go up and take pictures that the park ranger was kind of like, well, yeah, we need some close-ups. And then they messed around. They went up the side and then they went over and down and all around. They burned all the daylight, and then they start up the actual shoulder, George Washington's shoulder. And they go up between, and they do the ascent. They have a ticklish spot, they said, which was hard, probably.
Yeah, it looks like a little bulge like going around like the hair and the ear. I'm looking at a close up of the photo, and I'm sort of like, yeah, I guess I see the line, but I'm like, that's freaking awesome. It's like, that's so cool.
They get up, and like the sun is too dim in the sky to get the pictures that they originally went out for. You could do the second ascent, Alex. Somebody would want you to do that.
Yeah, I'll keep that on the back burner. But if it ever comes together, I would do it.
In the late 1940s, the Conns decided to settle down in an area they had found earlier on a trip to Devil's Tower, the Needles of South Dakota. Their years of living in a van and trucks and traveling across the country may have been over, but they still have plenty of climbing and adventure and exploration ahead of them. And the Needles checked all the boxes. There weren't many climbers, and there was an endless supply of climbing.
We found these needles. We decided that we had found a place where we could climb the rest of our lives and still find something new to do. So we built our life around that. It's funny how 50 feet of rock can keep you occupied all summer.
That's something people do a lot these days. They call it projecting now.
Yeah, project climb.
Where you do something over and over and over until you got it perfectly.
Then you sick your friends on it.
And then you tell your friends that it's easy. You show them how easily it can be done. Now, you rated climbs. You did not use the Yosemite decimal system.
We didn't rate them. I mean, it's always been a kind of mystery to us how people can rate a climb. So much depends on your mood, the weather, how tired you are. But they seem to think you can. We use this term delicate, which meant that you felt you might slip off at any minute, and that you wanted protection. Delicate seemed to do it for us.
They ultimately settled in South Dakota. You guys have climbed some of the routes. I mean, is there a style to the routes? Like, what were they doing?
They were bold, a little slabby, and they were only piton protected.
So they were unprotected?
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I mean, there's some knobs there that you can sling, but there's basically confidence climbing. You know, you're slab climbing and knowing what you're capable of and backing off, and that's what they did. They down climbed everything, pretty much. So they literally were planning on down climbing as they were going up on their first ascents. They didn't call themselves bold. They did a lot of heinous stuff, but like they would pass off the lead. One would back off and the other would go up, and they would just kind of take their time and go down and come back another day, and they did that for years.
Yeah, and in that 10 or 12 years that they were really climbing everything in South Dakota, they said that according to their counts, it was about 230 first ascents.
For 2 decades, the Conns quietly established hundreds of routes. By the end of the 1950s, though, they felt that the climbing scene was changing, starting to become too crowded, which, looking back, is wild to think about. There could have easily been less than 1,000 climbers who were leading in the country. The Conns continued to fill their lives with their passions. There was music. There was math. They got into caving, and they mapped 60 miles of Jewel Cave, a feat that took them 22 years. Through it all, they climbed off and on, and they always figured out how to work the least so they had the most time to do what they wanted to do.
There's a 1950s Summoned article that the Conns wrote that we work in our spare time, where they say that it's a matter of simple math. If two people work half the year, then it's the same as one person working year round. But it kind of just shows that they were basically rejecting the whole American dream, like the white picket fence, the nuclear family, settling. They were sort of choosing that what they did in their spare time was more important than what they did for work. That's almost un-American, especially at the time, like post-World War II. It's like full Americana, white picket fences and everything. I mean, were they like the original hippies, dirtbags? Like, was there even a term for it at the time?
I don't think they ever considered themselves radicals. They just considered themselves like doing what they truly wanted to do. They looked at each decision and they were like, but why wouldn't we do it this way? Because that's more fun for us.
But that seems so contrary to the norm at the time.
Yeah.
It definitely was, yeah. We asked her in the interview too, we're like, so what did other people think of you climbing these routes? And if they saw you up on a spire, they're driving through with their family on vacation, there's these two goofy people up on top of a tower, and Jan was also famous for yodeling. She was a huge musician, so you'd often hear just yodeling bouncing off the spires through the needles. And she just basically said, like, we didn't want to know, we didn't care, we didn't want to know what they thought.
In a way, they're 50 years ahead of the time, like in terms of climbing dirtbag and everything. Like that's almost too far ahead of your time to ever really be appreciated.
Doing these things that you really enjoyed, did you ever think of them as an example of the American dream?
We were just following our noses. We didn't have any grandiose ideas. Just trying to back away from the things we didn't like. It's easier sometimes to know what you don't like than what you do.
Have a lot of people said that you've been a role model or a hero to them, like people like me?
Yeah, there've been quite a few, and it always is just kind of amazing, because I don't know, it's in you to do some things and not others. There are lots of things we could have tried that we would have failed at, but what we found kind of suits us.
Chad, do you want to talk about the picket fences?
So there is a range in the Needles that is the most scenic, and it's the furthest away from people that is still pretty easy access, and it's called the picket range. And the reason it's called the picket range is it looks like a picket fence, but also it's because Jan looked at it and she was like, that's the only picket fence I want. They like literally hit every single first ascent on it, and it's it's a bunch of little towers, and they're pretty gnarly. I mean, we climbed a few of them, Wicked Picket and Split Picket, and some others that are just like
the Sickle.
They're rated the Sickle. Yeah, I mean they don't have difficult ratings, but 5.8 with a lot of exposure with bad gear.
Yeah, with a rope that won't catch a fall.
Yeah, when you're down climbing and there's like no possible case where anyone could rescue ever, like no one could hear you for months, just there was nobody out there.
Yeah, it's like inconceivable now just to think of how remote some of these places were while they were out there just pushing these limits.
Speaking of being out there, I mean, you said they lived in a cave at some point? The Conn cave? I mean, what's that all about? I mean, is that like even more out there?
Not really. I mean, it's closer to town, but it's far from everybody and very quiet, and no electricity and no washing machine and no running water. Because
I mean, did they actually live in the cave?
So they bought 20 acres of land, and they found...
So presumably there is running water, right? Because isn't that what makes the cave in a geologic sense?
Well, it's called the Conn cave, but it's more like a lean-to.
Sad.
It was literally blasted, like probably with prospectors' dynamite at some point, and it's like a boulder that's too low to boulder on, but it was blasted out in a concave shape, and then they lived there forever, like until she was 97.
And it's probably 30 square feet, if that.
She lived in the cave until she was 97?
The two of them lived together in the cave for over 60 years, with no electricity and no running water.
Dude.
Could you tell me a little bit about when you built the Conn cave?
Actually, we wanted to have a log cabin, and we figured we'd been living in a panel truck, and we figured we would need tools. Where are we going to keep the tools? And we decided that there was a little low cliff about 8 feet high on our property. And it had been blasted. And we dug out to the edge of where it had been blasted and put a single wall around, kind of concave shape. We're going to use it for a tool shed. But it looked so comfortable, and we were so lazy that we just built a shelf for the bed and moved in. And it suited us, had one door, one window, and we later put a skylight in, which was nice because you could lie in bed and look up at the stars.
What about in the rest of life? It must have been hard to take a bath without water when you got out of the cave.
Well, you take a sponge bath. Well, we usually went to bed dirty. We were too tired to do anything like that.
You seem to like to do challenging things.
Well, yeah.
Herb and you.
Except some things. If it's something we want to do, we wouldn't stop because it's challenging. But some people just seem to have to try something that's impossible all the time.
You see why this story is like so in alluring. Like there's every aspect of this thing felt like a fairy tale. Like
That's so crazy.
It's truly like people talked about them being like Hobbit-esque with like this big grin on their face and like fun and musical and like doing all these interesting things. And they truly were that way. Like you can't go into the concave and not like picture like Bilbo Baggins, coming out, and Jan pops out with this big grin like, hey, how you doing? And you're like, this is amazing. Like, this is actually real.
What do you hope that audiences take from her story? Or what do you think that Jan hopes that people take from the film?
Jan hopes that people will do what they want to do with their life. Like, Jan was like, if you don't like something, change it.
you can even relate this directly to the film when we were asking her if she was okay being interviewed and if she was, interested and open to being part of this film. She said, like, well, just don't do it because of me. If it's something you want to do, then that's fine. And I'm not going to stop you, even though she could have. So it's like her whole philosophy is like, if you think something's fun and interesting and if you're drawn to do something, then it has value. And so you should do it. And that's how they lived their life. And I think she didn't like giving advice, but when you've got the experiences that she has, you can't really help it. So one of the things that she said is too many people do what other people expect of them. There's a story, too, where they were on a trip in the Tetons, and Yvon Chouinard was their porter on the trip, and so they had some crossover there. And I'm not sure if he was influenced by how they were living, but, I mean, he went on to say things like it's very easy to complicate your life. It's a lot harder to simplify, and I think the Conns are, like, the number one example of that.
Yeah, do you think that their lifestyle is still radical these days? I mean, in some ways, the cave and the lack of electricity, like that seems even more radical these days. But the idea of choosing your own path,
I think there's a lot less pushback on it. I think it's just as radical if you
actually do it.
Are pushing as hard as they did. I mean, they truly went for it always,
It's funny to frame it that way, though, because it's like they truly went for it sort of in the big picture, but day by day, you'd probably look at their life and think like, that's a lot of leisure time. And like, they're basically chilling most of the time. And it would look incredibly like they're not going for it. You know what I mean? Like, it would look like so relaxed, probably.
You would think that, but Herb wrote like 46 books, like sci-fi novels. And he wrote a big mathematical book that was 60 pages long. And he was literally listed on the 100 greatest amateur mathematicians. It was a Wikipedia page for the 100 greatest amateur mathematicians in history. Like Ben Franklin was on the list and like a bunch of other people.
Yeah, he was writing letters back and forth to like mathematicians on the East Coast and like Australia about these like harmonic equations that he was just interested in. And that's how he spent his time.
Like a proper polymath, like wide-ranging interest.
And Jan was like, she played like 30 instruments. She loved the flute.
A lot of guitar.
In an interview, she said that at one point Herb was clocking her at 6 hours a day playing an instrument. Like 6 hours a day. And she's phenomenal.
One of the structures on their property had a lot of old tapes that had some of her original songs. So her music makes up the entirety of the soundtrack of Catching Pine Cones.
Makes it a lot easier to license that way too. It's funny that I don't know if you guys ever watched all of Cedar Wright's YouTube videos in sort of the early 2000s, but he would always make his own music for him. It probably is less good than what you're describing, but I'm sort of like, it feels like the same, you know, and someone's just like, oh, making films and making their own music for the films and the whole thing.
Jan was first known as a musician in at least the climbing circles in the DC area, but she went to Fort Churchill, which is on the Hudson Bay of Canada, like eastern Canada, after World War II was over, to play for the soldiers over Christmas. She did that 2 times. So she was a traveling musician that was so talented that she was getting invited. Like, she got invited to South America and didn't go. She played on TV back like in the 40s. So there was a lot of like just raw talent early on. And then there was like, I don't really want that. Let's just do climbing because that's more fun than we can play music around the campfire.
In her 70s, she did finally fulfill a lifelong dream of writing a musical, an entire staged musical that was performed, cast, had a number of performances, was well reviewed in the local newspaper, and it was called Run to Catch a Pine Cone. So to honor that is where the title of the film comes from.
What does the title mean?
She said it was something caught between heaven and earth. If you catch a pine cone falling, that you've caught it in a moment, and that's special and unique.
Isn't catching pine cones like terrible though? So like the idea of catching a pine cone, you're like, ow!
So here on the East Coast, we have leaves. And like in the fall, every year I'm like, my favorite game, like get the kids out, is catch a leaf. Like the leaves all come down and it's like just fun to catch a leaf. And that was my favorite game before I met Jan Conn and before I had kids. And then like we meet Jan and she's like, run to catch a pine cone. It's like going to get a hard thing. Like it's much harder to catch a pine cone because it's coming faster.
And it's ultra painful, yeah.
I always thought like, obviously it's the Conn's version of catch a leaf. Like it's just harder and you got to go for it more than whatever I've been doing.
Why do you guys think that the Conns matter? Like, why is this a story worth telling?
Because literally everyone will love something about it and will learn something from it.
How so?
So like for me, I'm a rock climber. I'm like, this is an excuse to go rock climbing. But there's like all this life history that they did so many different things and they changed gears a bunch of different times. And they're so wise and there's just so much there that is intrinsic to human life that we share through Jan, because she just says it in these simple, funny little ways. And so it's just a fun story, you know?
I think of the culture we're in now that's so like social media forward and look what I did and post stuff immediately. I really liked that this felt kind of more like a slow story. It was just their life. They weren't trying to be influencers. And Jan even talks about that a bit in the film, how when you find value in something, that's enough. And that makes it worth doing.
If you were teaching you when you were little, what would you say to her?
Go do your own thing. And if you want to do it, it has value. And I found that if you follow your own desires, you end up making a contribution. When you can't just sit out and say, well, I'm going to make a contribution to the world. You've got to follow your own desire and do it with all your heart, and you'll make a contribution.
There's a lot of people that look up to you.
Well, I don't know. I think you just got to have confidence in yourself that what you do is going to have a value somewhere sometime. And if it's in you to do it, you'll do it.